Due to some conversations with the county's health officer, as well as some changing guidance from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Mayor Shore has decided to lift the requirement on masks within city buildings. We are going to obviously adhere to that on the 10th floor, with the understanding, should COVID numbers change, should we get different guidance from our county's health officer or MDHHS, we can certainly revisit the mask requirement at that time. That being said, Clerk Richmond, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Wood.
Here.
Councilmember Spatafor.
Present.
Councilmember Spitzley.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Present.
Councilmember Daniels.
Present.
Councilmember Garza.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Hussein.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you. That brings us to the meeting minutes for February 14th, 2022. Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. I would move the minutes from February 14th as written.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to public comment on agenda items. We do offer the public 3 minutes. I don't think we have anybody from the public, quite frankly, but if there is somebody that I am missing, you have 3 minutes to speak to any of the agenda items. We only ask that you start with your name for the record. Seeing none, that brings us to agenda item 5. We actually have a number of presentations tonight, the first being the human resource hiring process, and we do have Mrs. Linda Sanchez-Gazella with us. We appreciate her being here. So you come on down into the well and make sure that that green light is on and that the mic's pulled close so we can hear you.
No, on the mic.
No, yep, sorry, that's the clicker. That's for later. All right, why don't you go ahead and talk into it to see if we can.
Hello?
Perfect, okay.
All right.
And so, folks, you do have in front of you on the dais this is kind of a flow chart. This is the Insight Recruitment Life Cycle that Mrs. Sanchez-Gazella provided us before the meeting. We thought it was, first of all, very timely. We had our external auditor, which is Manor Casterison, in. I think we had Steve Kernovich in on February 14th. And as part of that meeting, Councilwoman Spitzley actually asked for us to get with Linda and to have her in to talk about the human resources process, the hiring process, et cetera. Myself and Vice President Wood had already been in conversations actually with Linda. So again, very timely in the fact that that was kind of already in the works. And so we appreciate first and foremost the fact that Mrs. Sanchez-Gazella demonstrated kind of a willingness to come in and talk to us even before we had some members from this body actually ask for such a presentation. What an incredibly important department you had. And if folks don't know, human resources supports all other departments. So when you think of payroll, and you think of benefits, and you think of labor relations, et cetera, incredibly important. But obviously right up at the top of the heap is the recruitment and the hiring process piece. And so what we would like to do is turn the floor over to you. I know you want to talk a little bit about the human resource hiring process. I would ask folks to reserve questions and comments, general questions and comments, for maybe the end of the presentation so that we can have kind of an efficient process. So, Linda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Hussein, for the invitation. And council members, thank you for inviting me. Over the years, there have been numerous questions from City Council on the hiring process, where it starts, how it ends, why does it take so long. I think most of you know in the past, we had a different software. It was called Civic HR. When the Shore administration, when we entered in, I had an opportunity to evaluate that software. It was very cumbersome. 2 years ago, we moved over to a new software. It's used by many other city municipalities, and it's also used by the state of Michigan. It's called NeoGov. Thus far, I've been very pleased with the software. So in front of you, I printed something that actually comes from the NeoGov software, and it's called Insight Recruitment and Life Cycle. And it's color-coded. If you look on the bottom left-hand side of the sheet, it lets you know who's responsible for what. Now, there are a lot of icons on here. I don't want you all to think that because there are the numerous
I'll stop you
ones-
just for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Vice President Wood?
City TV had up the presentation on the OPED and not the flow chart, so I just,
Oh,
Yep,
it's
it
now
looks like they
off,
pulled it.
so.
Yep.
okay.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that, go ahead.
okay. Again, there are numerous icons or on the sheet. I didn't count them out, but I want it to be clear that things happen collaboratively as I go through and talk about the different sections. It doesn't mean that on one day something is happening and then we wait 2 days and then another thing is happening. So if you look on your insight on the schedule that was provided, the first thing that happens is your purple area, which says create a requisition. That is at the department level. The department looks at their vacancies, and they are the ones that start the requisition process. So at that time, the hiring specialists review it, they create the strategy, and then they also set up a kickoff meeting with the director or the hiring manager, whoever it is. At that meeting, they establish the guidelines. How long do you want it posted? Where do you want it posted? All the intricacies of the job posting itself. Then the requisition is established and it goes for the approval process. So in that, it goes into the Laserfish system and it goes to all the different departments who look at it to make sure that it is meeting the requirements that we need to have it met. Finance reviews it, OCA reviews it, the different, like I said, the different departments. It ends up in the mayor's office after I finally approve it, and then it comes back. And then the hiring specialist will take it and at that point turns it into an open requisition where we can post. It becomes active. The hiring specialist will create, in conjunction with the hiring manager, a plan for the exam questions. How do we want to test? Do we need testing? That type of thing. So then, the system itself, the applicants start coming in. And this system, the nice part about it, which wasn't done before, it looks at minimum qualifications. And so when a candidate applies, the system will look and say, okay, are all the checkbox, everything that we are asking for, is this candidate meeting those requirements? Now, sometimes people make mistakes, so I do ask my hiring specialists to go back and if people are rejected, to specifically look at those ones that are being rejected to make sure that they didn't accidentally check something that they weren't supposed to, or maybe they forgot to check a box. So we do go through that process. After the applications come in, then we, with this system, we let them know that they are eligible for hire. We set up the pre-testing. With this system, the candidates are able to create their own time frame for interviews so that a hiring specialist isn't having to call and say, can you come in on Monday? We have Monday, Tuesday, or Friday open. So it gives more flexibility to the candidate, to the applicant, for when they can come in for testing. Then, we just go through, we identify, we finally get to the interview process. The candidates are scored, and we go through all these processes. I want you to know that we go through these processes to make sure that we have all our data, all our statistics, so that we have it for EEO, all the requirements. If somebody challenges the hiring process, we have everything that we need to back it up. So it is very detailed. It does take from the beginning of a hiring to the end. It could take up to at least 8 weeks. Hopefully, it's not more. Sometimes, depending on the hiring manager, vacations, things like that, it could get where it's longer. I don't like that. I encourage the hiring specialists to, if one's going on vacation in my shop, that another hiring specialist pick up, so that nothing is left because somebody's on vacation. So I know it's quite detailed. I would invite any of the council members who would like to come into HR and meet with a hiring specialist, where we do have another presentation that we could give to go through it more specifically. At that time, if there are recommendations or ways that you all see that we can streamline, I'm happy to take those recommendations, but we work hard in HR. So that's my presentation.
Fantastic.
you.
We certainly appreciate it. Do we have questions, comments? All right, first Councilman Garza, then Vice President Wood.
All right, thank you, President Hussein. Good evening, Linda.
Hi.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Not
Good to
at
see
all.
you. So this is more for on the record. I know we just recently met, and I told you some of my concerns. And on the record, my concerns is when we're hiring the contract workers and we're not hiring the full-time positions, we're holding the requirements for the positions, and I am interested in meeting the hiring specialists, for instance, because we may be holding them accountable as far as the requirements for their job duties, but then what's the accountability for, let's say, the owner of that company sending out a low-skilled apprentice to do the work, which doesn't meet the requirements, and I'm hearing that happens quite often. So that's one of the concerns, of holding these contractors responsible for the specifications to get them the job in the first place.
Okay. May I respond?
Absolutely.
Okay, when a department goes out for contracting outside, it's a divided line. HR contracts for if a director calls and says, I need temporary help, and I need, for you to look at an agency or to recruit to see if we can bring somebody in. That's a contract employee. But there are departments who have needs, and they bring in agencies or other organizations to work for them. HR is not involved in that process.
So I guess then who is supposedly holding these people accountable? Because if we're putting out an application and there's certain standards that need to be met for the requirements to get this job in the first place, who's holding the contractor accountable for sending somebody in that doesn't meet those requirements to do the job?
That's something I could certainly take up with the executive office,
And that was going to be
and
my
get that
suggestion,
answer.
yeah. We'll
Mhm.
try to get you answers for sure. Vice President Wood and then Councilwoman Spitzley.
Thank you, President Hussein. Linda, I have a few questions for you. I first want to start off at the department level. You have a department, ABC department, who has 5 positions that are open. Until that department director moves those forward, HR is not involved. Is that correct?
Yes, to an extent. I do meet with the directors. I do go over their vacancy lists, but yes, you are correct. Until they make that requisition or look at that vacancy and talk to the HR specialist that we want to post, HR is not involved. That is correct.
So there is the potential that if a director has a vacant position that's part of the vacancy factor, that if they are other places in their budget or over budget, they could continue to leave that position vacant to use those funds to override the additional expenses.
Madam Vice Chair, I would have to defer that question to the Finance Department.
But there is that potential.
Yes.
Okay. Under the timeline, when you talk about the requisition approval, those steps there, can you tell me approximately how long those happen from the hiring specialist to payment and benefits, which is finance, to the HR director and then the mayor's office to sign off? Usually what is that timeline in there?
That should not go any more than, it should not go any more than 3 days, but it has gone on for maybe a week. If somebody gets busy and doesn't look into their Laserfiche and, but we approve them as they come along, and it goes right up to the mayor's office, and then they're approved. So that process generally doesn't take not more than a week.
Okay. So I remember when we had to have mayoral approval because we were doing a hiring freeze, and they had to move through that process to determine whether this was a critical position to fill. So now in the budget, you have these vacancies. Do you know why we are still going through the mayor's office if these are budgeted and we have the vacancies? Why that procedure is still?
That's the way the process was set up. I guess checks and balances to make sure that we are doing what we are supposed to do.
Okay.
Just a final review, I guess.
All right. And then the last question I have for you, and I know this came up a while back. I'm not sure whether it is still pertinent today or not. But I know in talking to someone, especially with the UAW, that had to do with testing and different things that happened. There were some issues where someone would come in for a physical and then 3 days later have to come back for a test and different things like that. And I know that especially when people were looking for jobs or had multiple applications out there, we had the potential of losing an applicant because of the time factor. Has that changed from what it was previously?
I'm going to smile and say absolutely. I
Good.
worked very closely with Dennis Parker, heard those needs, worked with the hiring specialist. So yes, that's been resolved where we are not bringing in somebody for testing on one day and then sending them away and then bringing them in for an interview. We have tried very hard to streamline that, so
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my questions. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Spitzer. Okay, fantastic. Okay. Councilman Brown and then Councilman Jackson.
Thank you so much, President Hussein. I was just wondering, I've heard from several departments and people in the community that there's a lot of vacancies that we have. So I was just wondering, what is our recruitment process or recruiting talent to the city to start this process?
Well, again, the first spot is with the department sending in the requisition, and then the hiring specialist sits down with the hiring manager. And at that point, it's determined where it is that we want to recruit. As far as HR, I mean, we've expanded into many, many areas and trying to recruit talent. We do Michigan Works, we do, I work with Michigan State University, with Lansing Community College, and different organizations. We have a list of organizations throughout the city that we send out our job postings to. We do everything we can. If there are suggestions that you have where we can recruit differently or more, we'd love to hear it because, we're doing the best we can. In special areas like, let's say Brian McGrain's shop, they're going to have, depending on if it's, well, maybe that's Andy Kilpatrick's, for a plumber or for an electrician or different areas like that we might need. They may know of different places that we can post to. So we always meet with a hiring manager and gather the knowledge gather their knowledge to do recruitment.
Okay.
So
Thank
really
you.
open to any suggestions.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilman Jackson, then Councilwoman Spitzley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Sanchez, for being here and explaining all this. A couple questions. First is, in your opinion, what do you think the number one problem for getting all of these vacant, or some of these vacant positions filled? And I know that's general because there's so many departments and it might not be the same, but as a specialist, what do you think the number one problem is?
Right now, if you want me to be honest, it's receiving the applicants. Even if we post the applicant pool, it's just not coming in. We're struggling.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, just speaking of these important positions, can you give us an update on the fire chief filling process and how, about any of the applicants that applied?
I can. We have gone through the initial phase, and we have determined a number of candidates that have been sent to the organization that we have selected to do the review. Those candidates are going through background, social media, whatever. It is a plan to have a community meeting. But those steps we're just in the process of defining. There will be a survey monkey that goes out to community organizations soliciting questions that they may want to ask of a fire chief. Those questions will all be taken in. The community forum I believe that there'll be an evaluation piece for people to fill out that will be reviewed, and then hopefully we can get 2 top candidates to go to the mayor, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you.
So really quickly, I really appreciate you asking that question. I think, there's been so much transiency in that position dating back to, I think it was 2018 when our agreement with East Lansing ended. And I think it's incredibly important to have consistent leadership in that fire chief position and then leadership that empowers. And so I had a few questions as well. Do we know, Linda, just for transparency, do we know how many people applied for that particular position?
There were a total of 19 individuals.
19 total?
applied. Yes.
Do we know how many, because I understand the vetting took place and I understand that we have a vetting committee essentially. Do we know how many made it through that process?
The people that made it through that process were narrowed down to 9.
Down to 9?
Yes.
Okay. And then realistically, and it sounds like this is almost a carbon copy of the police chief process.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
perfect. So realistically, we think we might be able to place somebody into that position when?
Hopefully, I would say by the middle of April, if all
Middle of
goes
April.
well. Mhm.
Okay. I certainly hope so.
Me too.
Yeah. Councilwoman Spitzley.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have a couple questions. So back to your recruitment. So, as part of, the ongoing, you have your chief diversity officer in HR. I'd be curious to know what her role is and how have you changed your recruitment practices to make sure that you have the most diverse pool. I ask that because I heard you say that you bring in the department and then you guys agree on where to post. And if I heard that wrong, please correct me. But what we're trying to do, I would assume, is we're trying to look outside the box to find the most qualified diverse applicant pool. And so how is that going, and what things have you changed to try to increase your diversity in your applicant pool?
Well, that's an excellent question, Councilmember Spitzley. We do have Guadalupe Ayala, who is our DEI officer, but in all honesty, we have not included her in the hiring process. There is a review that is done when we get to the selection, that we do include her in. But as of today, and I've been thinking about this a lot, so thank you for the question of how to incorporate or bring her in more to the process, because, yeah.
And I appreciate that. My concern is not as much as making sure. My concern is that bringing her in once you've pre-qualified folks is kind of like trying to get the horse back in the barn.
Okay.
You know, what I'm looking for is a change in how you recruit. What changes have you made to make sure that you are attracting the most diverse applicant pool possible? And I think that Guadalupe is great, so don't get me wrong there, because I do think she's great, but, you know, I think you need to front load the process versus bringing her in after you get the applicant pool, because I think by then it's too late. And so I would encourage you to look at how you're recruiting to make sure you have the most, the most diverse qualified applicant pool.
Right.
And the other thing is when you talked about, I think Councilmember Jackson may have asked you, why is it taking so long? Or why are positions not being filled? And you just said, lately, it's because we don't have the applicant pool. Well, and I understand that, COVID has kind of done that with a lot of organizations, but as we know here sitting on the dais, that issue predates COVID. And so I think that we need to also think about not just our reality right now, but, at some point, knock wood, COVID's going to be gone and we're going to get back to some semblance of normal. And so we have to look at ways that we can attract the most qualified, diverse applicant pool. And so we really need to front load that instead of, looking at the pool that we've got and then making sure, and then bringing her in to make sure we're diverse.
Yeah. I do want to reiterate, though, when we do have a job posting, that we do go out for a number of, we put the posting out to a number of organizations, and then we also have organizations throughout the city of Lansing, Ingham County, Eaton County, that that we mail or that we send out electronically, that posting, which is a very diverse pool.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
but thank you for those comments, certainly.
Councilman Brown and then Councilman Spatafor.
Thank you. Thank you for those questions, Councilwoman Spitzley. To that point, I'm new to the council. I was under the impression that the DEI officer worked with human resources or kind of under human resources, so the whole city would benefit from that diversity officer and the policies and procedures. And then also, I think, community-based with the Human Relations Community Services Department. Am I correct, or is that incorrect?
She is an employee of the Human Relations and Community Service Department. That's not to say that she does not work with HR in some things. She's new. We're still working and what that looks like and how that's going to come together. So she is involved in many of the things that HR does, yes.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Brown?
Kind of.
So she's not involved in the hiring and recruitment? But that's
No,
something-
not as of today, she's not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Spatafor.
Hey, Linda. Nice
Hey.
to see you. So it's clear that you've made leaps and bounds improvements of where we were a few years ago and even a few months ago. Are there any things that this body can do from a policy or budgetary perspective that would ease or make the hiring process, improve the hiring process or make working for the city of Lansing more attractive as we compete in a workforce that's pretty competitive right now.
Well, thank you for asking that. If you're asking budgetary-wise, I'm very short-staffed. And it's nothing that I haven't said in other arenas. I am short in the hiring area. I don't have a recruiter. I need to have a recruiter. Payroll. On that payroll side, I've got 2.5 people who work for the entire city to do all payroll. I have one person who does retirement, one person who does our safety, our health benefits, our FMLA.
For 1,100 employees?
Yeah. So during the recession, HR was cut significantly, and over the years, it just hasn't been brought back up. So I am tomorrow going to meet with finance and give them my wish list, so you all know that it's coming.
No, I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question is I know that the executive budget's being prepared for presentation to the council, and I know I haven't been here for a while because of my COVID diagnosis, but I gotta check in with our leadership and see when we're gonna start our stuff on the budget. But I'm excited to see how we can support the departments to better serve our residents.
Yeah, thank you.
And to answer that, we've been working pretty hard on that. So yeah, no, absolutely. We've been working with the administration, and that schedule should be released tomorrow. I really appreciate the last question. I was actually going to ask the same thing. In order, I think, to truly understand what we can do to support you, first, we have to understand what your organizational structure is. And so, more information on that would be fantastic. I think the other piece is, you speak of increasing demands on human resources, really across, any sector of our economy. And you guys are doing so much. And we talk about cuts during the recession. You guys are doing more now with less than what we did with more before the recession, quite frankly. And so the question then becomes, what is best practice? Is it 1.4 per 100 employees? Is it 2.4 per 100 employees? And I think, obviously that's going to vary depending on what you all are doing. And I would assume you fall far underneath that number. And so I would remind my colleagues on council that, we have, I think, a little bit more power with regards to the budget than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. And so, come that time again, speaking to the importance of this particular department and its support of all the city's department's employees, I think it's imperative that we take a very close look at this department and make sure that it is adequately funded. That being said, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank
Okay?
you very much.
Oh, there is an additional question. Are you sure? Is it a general comment?
It was a general
Feel free.
comment, and I think
Yep.
that you raised some really interesting points. It's very good that we talk about how we support the departments to be able to do the work, not only to get the work done, but if someone retires or someone leaves, I can point to a few people in the city's attorney's office that we keep, that if they leave, we're in trouble, from an institutional knowledge perspective, and I'm sure it's the same in HR, and it's definitely the same on this floor. So it's important not just from getting the job done, but from making sure the job gets done in the future.
Yeah, succession plans, it's very important. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really
Again,
appreciate it.
if
Yeah.
you all want to come to HR, I'd love to have you. Just let me know.
I know I certainly will take you up on that offer.
Yeah.
I'm sure a number of my colleagues will as well. Are there snacks? We're being asked.
I can arrange it.
There's budget for that.
Not
Thank
on
you
the
so
budget,
much.
though.
We greatly appreciate you being here.
All
Jake,
right.
check your email. I sent you an email. We are going to take a look at, agenda item 5C. This is an update from the City of Lansing's Chief Strategy Officer, Judy Kaler. So Judy, if you want to come on down. City TV, we do have a presentation. Judy, what we've done is we've actually set you up right here at this table. We have a clicker so that you can actually control the presentation once it comes up on the screen. We're not quite there yet. But that way you can actually, in the past, we've actually had to have City TV do it. And we've had somebody at the table, raise their hand or alert them as to when we're going to move forward. But you have the power tonight. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you being here. How are you doing? Great. Yep. Well, I wouldn't move too much because the cameras are positioned, right? So I think you're fine. Okay. Very quickly, just as a quick preface, When we imagined this position and then funded this position, I remember the conversations well. And there was quite a bit of conversation about making sure that council was engaged in the process moving forward. And we appointed Judy Kaler, I shouldn't say we, but Judy Kaler was appointed to this position in the summer, I believe, of 2020. And prior to that, she had been our income tax administrator as well as our city's treasurer. And let me just tell you how fantastic she has been, I believe, in this role since the summer of 2020. Incredibly engaging, I think transparent, accessible, which I certainly appreciate, willing to meet with all of the stakeholders that need to be essentially involved in some of the conversations that we talk about when we talk about the CSO position. And I know we had imagined it as, looking at, short-term expenditures, long-term debts, interdepartmental and intradepartmental, inefficiencies and efficiencies, redundancies, things of that nature. And then also, obviously our unfunded legacy debt. But again, we just really appreciate you. And your willingness to come before us and to have conversations, not only respectively, but, come down under the bright lights and into the well and have the conversation so the entire city of Lansing can hear. So with that being said, we do have a presentation tonight on specifically OPEB review. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the presentation, much like with Mrs. Linda Sanchez-Gazelle. I'd ask that unless there's something specific to, needing clarity on any item on any particular slide, that we reserve questions and comments for the end, just for efficiency purposes. So with that being said, we're going to turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Oh, it's even greener. Thank you. Great. Okay, so I apologize, I've not used this before. Okay, before I even start with this, though, I do want to address something that you had just talked about, President Adam.
Just very quickly, is the green light on?
It is.
It is? Okay, just move it a little
Do I need
closer.
to?
Yeah.
You know what I did when I moved the table? Is that better?
There you go.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you. One thing I do want to say is that you're right about this being specifically focused on OPEB, but there is another piece that you all have talked to me on separate occasions. I really am interested in performing an operational assessment. And for instance, like with HR, Linda and I have talked briefly about, looking at how many HR employees she should have, the best practices, how many do they have in Ann Arbor, what are their specific functions, are there technology instruments or assessments that can be used to shorten the time period it takes to recruit. So there are a lot of different elements of the different operations that need to be looked at. And quite frankly, you made the point when, and I'm not going to say the year, but I was here previously as treasurer, and we had 1,200 employees in the city. Now we have, if you look at our information here, it's like 763. So we know that the workload has not decreased, right? We know that it's increased, and we need to look at the way that we are operating, because it may have worked in 1998 or 2000, but we're now in 2022, so we need to look at some ways to do things differently. So I'll move into OPEB and I'll stop talking about that. But just to follow up with what President Hussein said, on July 10th, 2020, I was appointed CSO by the mayor and thankfully confirmed by you, City Council. And we all agreed that the main responsibility at the time was to look at OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits. So the liability at the time was $513,295. And we had the FHT that was formed in 2017 that started looking at that and was formed as an advisory committee to inform of different ways to reduce the OPEB liability. So, and this was based on the Siegel report. They also pushed the Siegel report to help us look at some other options and opportunities. As a result of that, of course, this position was created by you and the mayor and FHT, so this is a good thing. And what I want to first talk about is the number or the health care enrollment status, just so that we have a basic review, because I know that Councilmember Wood asked at one point, wanted to know how many were in the system. So I just want to review the city's retirement system, which first of all is a mature system. And what that means is that it's heavily weighted with retirees. So if you had this shape, the top would be our active, the bottom, which represents the largest number, that's the number of retirees. So if we're looking at the police and fire system, we have 699 retirees and beneficiaries. 12 of them, but then there's 12 people that it says terminated, but they really have been, I apologize, I was supposed to do this, wasn't I?
Is it not working? Faith, if you can hear me, okay, so we're actually on the next slide. You want to do one more?
You're right.
Perfect.
Do you mind if we do that, then we just say Faith move it and then she can move it? Is
Sure.
that-
Faith, could you give me a thumbs up if that will work? She's actually wanting you to navigate the slides, if possible. Excellent, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we have 12 that are eligible but are not collecting, and then we have 344 active plan members, and that's a total of 1,055. That's the police and fire. So if you look at the statistics, 67% are retirees and 33% are active employees. And I'm getting this data, as you can see on your form here, from our CAFR as of January 1st, 2021. So then looking at the employee retirement system, 961 retirees, 41 that are entitled but are not collecting, and then 429 active plan members or active employees that are working at the city. And that's 1,431. That's 70% are retirees and 30% are active. So it's a heavily weighted towards retiree, right? So ideally, when you have this type of system or any type of system, you want to fund it for the future. And so in order to fund these liabilities, we have our assets that are set up in a trust for our pension, but also for OPEB, or our healthcare retiree. So let's see, yes, thank you, that's right. So the assets are held in a healthcare reserve, and there's also a pension trust as well. So as of January 1st, 2021, there's $38 million for the employee retiree and $45 million for police and fire. But in addition to the 38 for employee retiree, we have an additional 37 million, and that is a VEBA account that was developed, I believe, in 1998. So those two funds go together for the employee retirement system. And so the city's contributions have not been adequate over the years. And what does that mean? Well, that means that we operate a pay-as-you-go. What can you afford to pay? Versus having, like, if you have a credit card and every month you have to pay that $100 and you pay down your amortization schedule, right? And then you know that at the end of that schedule, you're going to be paid off. Well, we have our schedule, but it's not the amount that you would need to pay it off exactly, within the time period that has been allotted. So we have this pay-as-you-go, but in 2023, we're looking to fully pre-fund OPEB, not in 2023, but have a set plan that will pay this down to zero by 2041. And this entails also a combination of funding alternative where we would pay for some of the benefits out of the trust, which is ultimately what you established the trust for, correct? So I just want to go through that, and then I would like the next page, please. Okay, so these documents, the next two, the ERS and the police and fire fiscal year ending documents, I'm not going to really go completely through those, and I wanted to explain to you what they are. What I did is I took our CAFRs and I took note 17 that talks about what the liability is, what our assets are, and then what will be unfunded. So I took them so that you could look from fiscal year ending 2019 to 2020 to 2021, just so that you get an idea of the change that has taken place over that last 3 years. And we can go through this a little more if you'd like, but I just did that for ERS and then police and fire. And it just shows the decrease and the decrease, in the liability, but also the increase in the assets, which obviously positively impacts what the net liability is. I'm going to ask you to move, because I just, yes, and to the next page, please. So, when we discovered that we really needed to have a plan in place and really needed to develop a mechanism for paying down this liability, we all went to work. When I say we all, that means you, that means the unions, that means employees. We worked with Greg Stump, who's the city's actuary. We worked, there were people from the FHT that also worked with us. So we had this comprehensive team that approached this. And so one of the interesting things, I was talking with you, President Hussein, and Vice President Woods about this, that in the past there have been a lot of different numbers that have, been thrown out there. And part of the concern with that is that when you look at this, you have to realize that it's a snapshot in time. So, for instance, like when I first started, I was told $563 million. That is what OPEB liability is. But if you look now, it's $229 million. So some people, they get it caught in their mind that, well, you said it was this, now it's this. Are you guys cooking the books? Are you doing something? It's a comprehensive piece that has many moving parts. The mortality tables, the investments. For instance, our investment return and we have a great retirement board that oversees this, 9.75. That was our rate of return. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal, if you ask me, especially when you see the number of dollars that have been invested. The board reduced the amortization schedule. We made changes with the health care. We had, in one category, we had 8 different healthcare plans. We condensed it down to 1 and saved $2.5 million just on that alone. So what we are doing is we're looking at all the different components that make up the OPEB liability and evaluating how can we impact this? How can we decrease healthcare without, blowing up the promise that has been made, for healthcare? How can we look at this and strategically reduce this without disrupting services to our residents, without leaving our residents, or our employees, without health care. So it's a great opportunity because it's not as cut and dry. There are a lot of different options and opportunities to reduce this liability. One idea that was thrown out there was to bond for it. We don't necessarily have to do that. There are some municipalities that have bonded for it, but there are other ways to reduce the unfunded liability, and we're exercising all those different opportunities. And quite frankly, our big game changer was when we invited our actuary in to start working with us. He works with other municipalities all across the United States. He's well regarded. He knows how to look at the different components and how to work with councils, work with unions, work with employees, and to develop solutions that are really customized to your own municipality. Because what works in Lansing won't work in Flint. What works in Flint won't work in Ann Arbor. So just having that perspective and understanding that it has to be a plan that works for Lansing and one that's sustainable. Okay, so also, I went off on that, but we negotiated fees, competitive contract bidding, union partnerships. Also in the past, there were concessions made by the employees and unions, so we have all collectively impacted this liability. Also, we changed the medical carriers. We constantly are looking at ways to reduce the medical cost, so that's something that we'll never stop doing. We're negotiating fees down. We self-fund PHP, which saved us $500,000. So we're constantly looking at ways to reduce the liability while providing the benefits. And, okay, I'll get on my soapbox here. Another reason why it's really important for us to be able to provide an attractive benefit package and salary is exactly what, my colleague was saying. You can't entice people to come to something that is not worth their time, value, or what have you. So we have to remain competitive. So, okay, I'll get back on this. Also, we are, the retirement board, this was critical too, reduced the investment rate from 7.25 down to 7. So we made all these collective moves these individual moves that collectively really moved the needle on the liability. We changed the actuarial assumptions. Inflation, that was factored in, which we all know that that's something that is top of mind for everyone right now. Retirement ages, mortality tables. I tell you all these things because one thing that, we have a plan that I will come back and share more extensively with you, but all these different elements at any point in time can change. So we all understand we have to have a plan, but we all have to understand that we have to be agile, and we have to also understand that we have to be flexible, because what if we have another pandemic? Or what if we have I like this better, Lansing just booms economically. We are just blessed and it just explodes. Then that will impact, maybe we'll, pay more towards OPEB. The bottom line is that we have to have a plan, obviously, but we also have to plan to have another plan, if that makes sense. Okay, then my last, funding progress, please. Thank you. So what this document is, and Carol and I think Councilmember Garza saw this, but we had the actuary come in and he presented to the boards. And it was very, very exciting because he started talking about OPEB. And correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Wood, but I don't think that we've talked about OPEB very much in the past in the retirement. Okay. So the exciting thing is that we acknowledge that it's something that we have to own and that we have to have a plan in place. So he came to the retirement board meeting and talked about, so you'll see ERS, the OPEB, 154 million, that's what the actuarial liability is. Assets, 75 million. Unfunded, 79 million, so the ratio of what's funded is 49%. Police and fire, 195 million. And you can go back to your documents where I showed you across, the 3-year comparison. Police and fire, 195 million. Assets, 45 million. Unfunded, 150 million, so that's 23% is funded. But combined, it's 349. Assets, 120. But now it's 229 million versus the 535 million when I started in July 2020. So collectively, we have made some really good decisions. And I will let you know this too, that I meet monthly with executives from Department of Treasury, and they are impressed with what the city of Lansing is doing. And there are other municipalities that inquire and ask, how are you doing this? How did you do this? What are you doing? So it's a team effort. I applaud everybody, and I'm so grateful that I had the group of people that I had to work with, because it took everyone to make this happen. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then last, so you say, okay, great, Judy, these things are nice. What's next? So we're gonna continue to collaborate with our partners, with you, with everyone that wants to help us to continue to solve this. The funding continues to improve. One cautionary tale that was given to us by our actuary is that, the years have been great to us investment-wise, right? We don't know how long that will last, so we have to keep that in the back of our minds. Then also, in talking with Mr. Stump, his assessment is that by 2041, the pension and OPEB will be fully funded, which is amazing in my mind. I think that that's exciting. Obviously, things could change, but with the assessment that we have, with what we're doing and the moves that we are making and the strides that we are making, 2041. But that also, please understand that that entails us paying out of the trust. And we're working through that to see what that looks like, how that impacts the general fund, how that impacts other pieces of the budget. And then also, we are working on a funding policy, and this was something that we had a sub-work group, and Councilmember Woods was on this, and we talked about how if you memorialize it, if you write it down, if you have a plan and it's written, you more than likely are going to follow it. I don't know how many of you have read this, but like we have in our retirement ordinance 292.37 of 1998. In that ordinance, had we followed the schedule, the payments, they were predicting that it would have been paid, the OPEB would have been fully funded July of 2022. We're not there, but we're getting there. We're getting close. So my point is that I'm really excited that this position was created so that, you know, I can spearhead this and keep my eye on it, and we move forward, and we have goals, we have a corrective action plan, we have the funding mechanisms that we are working on. So this is what it takes, obviously, right? You can't just one day assume that things are going to work out. No, you have to have a plan. So our plan is to fund this and to fund it well and to look at other areas and improve other areas of City Hall. With that, I'm going to stop because I could talk all day. I'm so excited, but I will stop.
That was a great presentation, a ton of good news, I think, baked in. I am going to, in just a minute, entertain questions and comments. But please note that we do have still on the agenda a closed session. And typically, I wouldn't mention that, but we do have, as part of our presentations tonight, we have some of our first responders coming in, and we want to make sure that we're respectful of their time as they have other commitments that they need to attend to later on in the night. So that being said, Councilwoman Spitzley, Vice President Wood, and then Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was so wonderful to hear. You know, because a couple years ago, it was, the sky was falling, you know, as it related to our unfunded liability. And so I really appreciate the effort by the administration and by our workers to do what's necessary to bring it down as far as you have. So bravo, well done. So, you know, now that we've done those accolades, now I ask you, what's next? You know, as the Chief Strategy Officer, you know, one of the things when you were brought on is to look at the department and look at the city holistically to find, you know, efficiencies. And I appreciate that this has taken probably a lot of your time, and I'm glad it has, because it was critically important that we, you know, take care of our employees. But as we're looking at other things, properties, you know, as we look at HR, we look at other departments, is there a plan or a strategy to look at other areas in the city of Lansing as you've looked at OPEB? And one of the other things was that I'm glad you're here, but I understand as part of the ordinance that we were supposed to have regular updates from you as well, and so I hope you come back at least quarterly to give us those updates. And that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Wood and then Councilman Garza.
Thank you, President Hussein, and thank you, Judy, for being here. Just a couple of things that I want to pass on to my fellow council members that Judy had alluded to. Part of what we are talking about when we're talking about making payments from the general fund into OPED is currently, right now, healthcare is being paid for out of the general fund. There for retirees. There's nothing coming out of the trust. That's why there is so little being put into the trust. The goal will be to determine how much we are paying out of the general fund for health care for retirees and moving that over to OPED and then making the payments out of that. This will be able then to be a cost neutral through this process. Also, the fact that we continue with our investment strategies, those dollars continue, depending again, as Judy indicated, depending on how the markets fluctuate, will end up increasing in that arena as well. One of the things we always caution about, especially with the retirement board, is that if you close the system, that means there's no employees paying into the system, and all you have is the money that is currently in the system to pay out to the retirees. You saw what we were looking at when she talked about the pyramid system and how many are on the bottom rung of that. I know that that was one of the recommendations that came out of the FHT, was to close the system. That's not something that the retirement boards or that believe, is beneficial to that. So, I just wanted to give you a little insight into that. We were extremely thrilled when we heard, and Councilmember Garza was there. He's just new on the ERS board, but as Mr. Stump was going through how we can potentially pay for this and what it would look like, we looked at, we saw some reality there that would move us forward. He also, even though our assumption, our rate is 7% and we're earning 9.7, he also pared that down, not using that figure, but using the 7%, so that anything above that then is a benefit for us as well. So I just wanted to bring that information to you so that you had a clear understanding of where we are with this as we move forward.
Thank you. Councilman Garza.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Judy, for being here tonight. Good to see you. We are definitely trending in the right direction, so that is great news. But could you tell us, I know you said that by 2041, we should be completely funded. Where are we at right now?
That is a good question. Let me see if I brought this. I did fill out so PA 202, there's a category, so we have to report. So if you're not over 60% funded with your pensions or 40% funded with your retirement or OPEB, then you have to fill out PA 202. So this year, we are only having to fill out for 3 because 1 is considered funded by PA 202 definition. I can give you the exact, actually, I think I might have that here if you'll give me one. No, I didn't bring that. If you don't mind, I would love to get that to you.
Great. Okay,
And I'll
thank
make
you.
a note of that.
Do we have any other questions? Seeing none, we really appreciate you being here. What we will look to do, and I agree, Councilwoman Spitzley, what we'll look to do is bring you in maybe more consistently, quarterly basis, and then kind of in the lead up to those meetings, I'll work with Vice President Wood and obviously my colleagues on council to determine what it is we're looking for, and we can talk about presentation materials at that time. Okay?
Perfect.
Thanks so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
right.
Have a great night.
You too. So we do have Jake Brower with us, who is our budget director. He has been understanding enough to allow us to punt item D because he understands that those presentations ran just a little bit longer than we expected, but they were fantastic, so we certainly didn't want to cut them short. So that moves us actually to discussion action item, and we have one under closed session, so I would move I'd turn the floor over to Vice President Wood at this time.
Thank you, President Hussein. At this time, I would move pursuant to MCL 15.268C of the Open Meetings Act. I hereby move that we recess into closed session for strategy and negotiation sessions connected with the negotiation, the memorandum of understanding between the City of Lansing and United Auto Workers Local 2256 and a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Lansing and Teamsters 243 as requested by the city.
There is a motion on the floor. Further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Wood,
Yes.
Councilmember Hussein,
Yes.
Councilmember Spitzley, Councilmember Spatafor, Councilmember Garza. Councilmember Jackson. Councilmember Daniels. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
7 yes, 1 no.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. We will reconvene the city council meeting after our closed session. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at 6:51, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the committee of the whole meeting. We are at agenda item 7F. This is a resolution for a collective bargaining agreement. I am going to turn the floor over to Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. I would move the collective bargaining agreement with the UAW Local 2256 Memorandum of Understanding regarding the extension of voluntary opt-in in the deadline for the healthcare savings plan. And with that, I would move that, and we'll have further explanation during the council meeting.
Sure, there is a motion on the floor. Further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to item 7G. Vice President Wood.
Thank you, President Hussein. The next one is the collective bargaining agreement for Teamsters Local 243 Supervisory Unit for a period covering February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2025. And again, there will be further explanation during the council meeting. With that, I would move the agreement.
There is a motion on the floor. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to our last agenda item for the night. That is agenda item 7H. Vice President Wood.
Thank you. Again, this is the collective bargaining agreement for Teamsters Local 243, the clerical. This is technical professional unit. It covers the period of February 1st, 2022 through January 31st, 2025. And we'll have further explanation during the council meeting. With that, I would move the resolution.
Fantastic. Is there further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries, and at 6:50, looks like about 6:53, with no other business before the body, we are adjourned. See you guys at 7.